And then for Kentucky fans, where are you at mentally right now? Like, are you nervous at all about this game because Arkansas has been so bad? Like that Calipari can come in and maybe pull this off. It doesn't feel like they are. And they probably,
you ready?
But that's interesting. Like thrumming under the surface. Like, is there any bit of nerves that your team, which has been really good this season, like could actually watch Cal come into your building and beat you? I don't expect it to happen, but that's also part of this as well. Kentucky's been really, really good. It'd be something, man. If we hop on this pod Sunday, GP, and we're talking about Arkansas beating Kentucky and Rupp Arena, that'll be something. I don't expect it to happen, but obviously that's part of the calculus too.
Sure, but like that has not even popped into my head until you said it. It's never occurred to me even once.
You've never been considered the possibility Arkansas might win this game.
No, but the last time I said that about a high-profile game, it was K's last game inside Cameron Indoor. And they went and got it.
How hilarious would it be? And we were like, that'd be hilarious, but come on, this isn't going to happen. And then
that is really the conversation we had. That would be hilarious, but it will not happen. And then it happened, and it was hilarious.
A few moments later.
A total team effort. Coach Calipari comes back to Rupp and rocks the house with a win. 89-79, Arkansas beats Pope and the Cats.
I don't know why y'all listen to us. We don't ever know what we're talking about. Hey there. I'm Gary Parrish.
I put it out there, too, for the record, Gary Parrish. We got about 22 minutes in, and I had a little thing going on up in this noggin. I said, you know what we have not talked about yet on this show earlier in the week? I was like, we haven't even discussed the chance that Arkansas might win. I will regret this if I don't bring it up. And then what happened?
Hey there. I'm Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports IO College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. The IO College Basketball Podcast, it is presented by Jersey Mike's Subs, a sub above. Matt Norlander, that's him, clean shaven. He's here with me. If you watch it on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Let's get into it. The place to start, obviously. The same place we started late Saturday on Inside College Basketball, CBS Sports Network. And that place is Rupp Arena. What a scene in Lexington. Final score, Arkansas 89, Kentucky 79. Even though it did not pop into my head until mid-podcast Friday, John Calipari, he did it. He entered with a team that was just 1-6 in the SEC, missing its best NBA prospect. Still, he guided Arkansas to an upset of Kentucky in his first game against the program he previously coached, to 4 Final Fours, and, of course, the 2012 National Championship. He was booed when he was introduced to the crowd. He smirked for the camera, but by the time the game was over, lots of those same booing fans, they weren't even around anymore. Cal sent them to the exits early. Is this going to flip the script on Arkansas season? I'm skeptical. Rest assured, I think UK remains on the right side of this breakup for now, but John Calipari did win the weekend. That's for sure. So Norlander, let me bring you into this by just asking you what you make of everything that went down at Rupp Arena on Saturday night.
Yeah, it became the biggest story in college basketball. You led Inside College Basketball with it. We did lead CBS Sports. David Cobb flew up. We did CBS Sports HQ studio work together on Saturday night. That was a good time. And we went deep into the night. And this was supposed to lead the HQ. We're going to get into this game. We are coming off what I truly believe will be one of the 3 or 4 biggest days of consequence and noise and headlines and everything in the sport of basketball in 2025. I mean, the Luka Anthony Davis thing felt so surreal. It broke in as we were just finishing, and then that completely flipped everything upside down and upstaged the Calipari stuff. But this comes on a day where you had 11 ranked teams lose. 10 of those 11 lost to teams in which I believe they were the favorites. 5 top 15 teams lost at home. You had teams go out, and Arkansas joins the likes of Kansas State, USC, Georgia Tech. We'll get to those later on, but these are all teams that got really big wins on Saturday, and yet none of those teams could wind up in the NCAA tournament. You had huge losing streaks come across the board with Houston and Michigan State and Louisville and Iowa State. We're going to get to all of that. And Calipari going in and actually doing this with his, and let me be clear here, and his players, to me, makes it even more memorable because the entrance, like we all waited, what were they going to respond with? It was more boos than cheers, but it wasn't on the level of what Pitino received in 2001. It seemed a little bit mixed there. Get into the gameplay as well, but then there was like the super weird scene, like the game is over. Some of the Kentucky fans started booing. Maybe they were still booing Cal. Maybe they were booing Mark Pope. Maybe they were booing Amari Williams, who had an amazing game. I don't know. It was a surreal scene. And then Cal, he runs off the floor.
Yeah.
Alyssa Lang was doing the sideline for ESPN. That she gets him, and then he gets caught. Did you see the clip where, like,
yeah,
he's like doing? I don't know what he was doing, but like he's on a live television interview, and then he's yelling at him like he's one of his kids. Dude, there was so much about Saturday that was insane. I want to get into the game, but I want to just ping this right back to you. I don't want to go on too long. What were your thoughts on just, I don't know, the overall vibe surrounding that game before, during, and after?
Well, so we talked on Friday about what we thought it might look and sound like, what I personally, or at least how I personally felt it should look and sound like, or at least if the building was filled with people who have a similar mindset to me. And it wasn't exactly that, but it wasn't vicious. It obviously wasn't violent. John took it in stride, whatever. Let's not say another word about that. And then the game starts, and I think there has to be something to the idea that the buildup is too long and too intense, and it takes a toll on the home team players who are supposed to make sure they don't lose this game because it feels like more of an event than a game. That's what K's final game at Cameron Indoor felt like. I remember having a similar conversation. Like, it was just so intense and it was so big, and then the game started and it just, the players weren't, it felt unusual and they didn't show up. And I think you could say the same thing about the Kentucky guys. Like Matt Jones, Kentucky Sports Radio, tweeted something along the lines of, and he's been in that place his whole life. And it was like, I don't remember ever the building ever feeling like this or looking like this in anticipation of a game. And they've obviously had some like lots of incredibly big games there, but this was different for obvious reasons. And I can't quantify it, right? I don't, it's not a tangible thing, but I think there's got to be something there that the buildup is counterproductive for the home team who just cannot lose this game no matter what. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so a few takeaways on that. One, keep in mind they didn't have Lamont Butler, which was clearly a factor. They still don't have Kirk Kriisa back, but they've won games without Kriisa. But still, Kentucky was not at full force, and neither obviously was Arkansas. They didn't have Boogie Fland, and not having Fland, to me it looked like Arkansas collectively as a program, their players, it was under discussed. The DJ Wagner, Adu Thero, Zvonimir Avicic, those three players who wore Kentucky threads a season ago, they combine for 52 points by themselves. Okay. And then Janelle Davis had one of his 2 or 3 best games in an Arkansas uniform. He's underperformed this entire season for the most part. He looks good. And Kentucky, although I want to be clear about this, there were other factors in this. When I watched this game play out, it looked like Kentucky was filled with a bunch of guys that weren't emotionally invested in this game. You understand why it would mean something to Mark Pope. You understand why it means a ton to John Calipari. If anything, I thought he downplayed it after the fact more than I really thought that he would. And you would understand why Arkansas is a program, because they're desperate. They need a win like this. Kentucky did not rise to meet the moment, and that was clear. From an X and O standpoint, yet again, the defensive lapses are a significant issue. I thought having no Butler I thought it was glaring in this game, and I'm not saying if had he played, it definitely would have been different. You can't convince me otherwise that it wouldn't have been more competitive and much closer. But credit to Calipari in Arkansas, because where has this been? Like, credit and where have you been all season? We talked about it on HQ, and I apologies, but obviously because of my studio duties, I didn't see what you're doing on ICB. But it was asked, like, all right, is this gonna change Arkansas season? My answer is no.
Right.
And I don't say this cynically. I just say it as pragmatically. This is a 13-8 team that is now 2-5, 2-6 in its last 8 games overall, and still is staring down road games against Texas A&M, Auburn in 3 of its next 5, and one of the home games is against Alabama. So if Calipari and his team are able to really reverse course, that'd be incredible. I don't think that was I really don't think that's the case whatsoever. But it was good gains, a memorable night, and the kind of result that we will, as we sit here on Sunday, Parrish, I know that we will talk about and remember this game. Even if Arkansas winds up being bad for the rest of the season, it will still be a memorable thing. I thought we'd remember it because of the way that Calipari going back and him being how he was received. That's not going to, in my opinion, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that's not what we're going to remember about this game. We're going to remember it that Arkansas was probably bad in year 1 under Calipari, and everything, whatever comes after this as his tenure there. And Kentucky was largely pretty good immediately. And then that one game they had scheduled against each other that first season, Arkansas went in and kicked their ass. A really weird result. If I'm a Kentucky fan, I'm nervous, man, because we continue to lose these games where you have really bad defensive lapses. And I'm just telling you, I really do think it's going to nip them in the bud once we get to March.
I'm with you on Arkansas. I think they had a great day. I don't know that it's going to be a season-changing anything because there's some like statistical stuff that it makes it very easy to understand what happened inside Rupp Arena. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but let me try. A bad three-point shooting team that doesn't take a lot of threes typically took a bunch and made a bunch, and they won on the road. That's what happened. Arkansas was 13 of 25 from 3. It's 52%.
Pick the perfect time. The irony of that, keep going, GB. The irony is that Kentucky fans have moaned for years, rightfully so, that the Calipari coached UK teams would have these opponents come into Rupp and they wouldn't be good three-pointing shooting teams, and then they'd find their groove in that building somehow, and then cosmically his team winds up doing that, being 52% from beyond the arc.
Right. So 13 of 25 from 3. They shot more threes than normal and made way more than normal. On the season, I'll just give you some numbers. They make 33.5% of their three-point attempts. Against Kentucky, they made 52%. On the season, 29.4% of their points come on three-pointers. Against Kentucky, that number jumped to 43.8%. On the season, they attempt 37.6% of their field goal attempts from beyond the arc. Against Kentucky, that number, again, jumped to 43.1%. So it was more threes than normal, way more makes than normal, and that's a recipe for an upset on the road. But I don't know that that's replicable. In fact, I'm certain it's not. So keep in mind, that was an amazing moment, an amazing performance. Arkansas is still 2-6 in its past 8 games and still missing its best NBA prospect. So I'm skeptical, especially under the assumption that Boogie Flame's not going to play again for the Razorbacks. They can be better, they can be better, but I'd bet against them digging out of this hole that they've created and making the NCAA tournament. They're still just 3-8 in the first 2 quadrants. They've only got 2 quadrant 1 wins. The resume is still unworthy of NCAA tournament consideration, but we'll see.
Yeah, Arkansas only had 8 turnovers as well, which I thought was key. The how well they took care of the ball. All 5 starters got into double figures, which was key. And that combined with like Andrew Carr, like he's not 100%. I think he had 2 points or maybe 3. Kobe Brea had like 5 points. Weird game for Kentucky. We'll see we'll see. I don't want to call it a one-off because, well, in some ways it is a one-off, the circumstances there, but Kentucky's got a weird thing developing here where, one, they've lost 3 of 4, problematic, and the win, well, they went on the road at Tennessee earlier in the week, but they seem to be playing up against like or above competition. And there's some teams that aren't as good as Kentucky, and some of it's understandable. Like you went on the road against Georgia, but like Georgia waxed you. So they're a little bit unpredictable in that regard. And I think that's what you get. I think that is, broadly speaking, a function of when you have a really, really good, effective offense and a pedestrian defense. These kind of results can happen. And so now we'll preview the games to know upcoming here at the end of the pod, but they got a road test against another good SEC team upcoming there. But I love a good plot twist, and this was certainly that. I'll also say my last thought on this, because we mentioned this on the HQ show as well. You get this often, not always, but often across all sports. On nights where you're raising a banner, getting a championship ring, welcoming back a big-time player or coach for whatever reason, or there's reason for high anticipation that makes the average ticket price for that game way above what it otherwise normally would be. You see in the NBA, you see across all sports. Sometimes the home team does in fact win, but sometimes you got like these big letdown moments. We said it as we previewed it before this game, and I even played. I brought it up. I was like, I wonder if that's going to wind up being a thing here. Lo and behold, it did. Now both these parties can put this behind them and turn toward February and just the gauntlet that is the SEC.
Yeah, next up for Arkansas, that's at Texas on Wednesday. For Kentucky, at Ole Miss on Tuesday. If you're curious, I moved UK to number 9 in the top 25 and won. Like everybody, just about everybody in that range, like lost. So there's just like not a lot of movement in that range because whether you're talking Iowa State, Michigan State, Kentucky, Florida, like all these teams right there, they all took losses, some of them worse than others, but there wasn't a lot of movement in that area of the top 25 and 1 just because, they all did the same thing, or at least most of them did the same thing. Moving on, weird weekend in the Big 12. I want to go there next. First, though, let's get our first word from our partners.
When you need your sports news anywhere,
we've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Weird weekend in the Big 12. Iowa State got blasted at home by a Kansas State team that entered 9-11. We're going to get to that. Texas Tech lost its leading scorer and coach in the opening minutes and still won at Houston. We'll get to that. Bobby Hurley pulled his team off the court, didn't shake hands with Tommy Lloyd. We'll get to that. But let's start in Waco, where Baylor came from 21 points down to beat Kansas. Final score, Baylor 81, Kansas 70. Norlander, you wrote about it. Tell us what you decided to focus on.
Well, okay. Big 12 was the most compelling league of the day on Saturday. And frankly, had Calipari not won at Kentucky, maybe we would have opened on the conference, I think, at large for maybe the first time this season. Nevertheless, we're here now. Let's get into it. And I think that the Kansas loss was as meaningful a result as any that we saw on Saturday. Big 12 also had the best game of the day, which we'll get to in a second with the Red Raiders and the Cougars. Kansas fans I know are frustrated, and I wrote a column. You can read it, cbssports.com on the CBS Sports app. A couple things going on here with the Jayhawks. They find themselves in a lot of close games. They find themselves caught up in games where they're at threat of losing late when they should have never been at threat of losing late to begin with. And I don't know what Bill Self is going to do to fix this. He's a really, really good coach. The column points out that Kansas right now is really flirting with something that it has not experienced. These are champagne problems. I understand that, but still, it's Kansas. And as I wrote in the column, it is literally a different standard than every other program in all of college basketball. When you look what it's done and how it has lorded over its conference for decades, there is not another program that actually has the standard of the Kansas Jayhawks, at least within the context of what it does in its league and the regular season, let alone the fact that it obviously the amount of one seeds it gets and national titles, all of that. Kansas had not finished outside the top 3 in its league in back-to-back seasons since a year after I was born, 2 years after I was born. 81, 82, 82, 83 was the last time it happened. They haven't even finished back-to-back seasons outside the top 2 since the 1980s period. It was about 7 years after that. And now they're pacing to do this. And ironically enough, this is happening in consecutive seasons in which they were the number 1 team in the preseason. KU fans listening and that are worth their salt are all too aware of the weird fact that Kansas has never even made a Sweet 16 ever when it's been a preseason number 1 team. And now you're getting there's some weird juju here again. For whatever reason, he's not playing Flory Badunga nearly enough as I think he should. And obviously Kansas fans, GP brought it up a few weeks back, the KJ Adams stuff, DeJuan Harris, there's just something it's not working collectively. The transfers aren't as good as they should be. Kansas lost the game on Saturday after holding a 21-point lead. It was the biggest blown lead in the history of that program. And Kansas became the first team that was ranked in at least 15 years to lead a game by 15 or more points at halftime and then go on to lose that game by double digits. That's exactly what we saw on Saturday. Because it's Bill Self, and frankly, because it's Kansas, I'm not going to put off the potential for there to be a pretty sharp turnaround and for KU to get its act together. But I've heard from a few folks here on Sunday about just some uneasiness. Like, are we really just going to be average again? And by average, by Kansas standards. So KU had no business blowing that game, like none whatsoever. And credit to Baylor, which needed Rob Wright he went next level. They lost VJ Edgecombe, who's going to be a top 5 pick, absolutely a top 10 pick. He was gone for most of the second half. They didn't have Jeremy Roach for the game, and Baylor, which has had its own issues, it hasn't found its identity. Parrish for 2.5 months. It manages to pull out a win that, frankly, like you win a game like that, maybe that really does put your trajectory of your season on just a little bit of a different course. But to me, for as good as the win it was for Baylor, I just felt compelled to write about Kansas on a super busy, super noisy day, because I think there should be some alarm bells ringing when you look at the pattern that has established with so many of these KU results. This team should be better than it's been over the past month, and it's fallen well short of what most people thought it would have been when we went back to November.
I think the way you put it is accurate, that Kansas's problems are always, or at least usually, smaller than most people's problems. Like, I go on radio in Kansas City every week with Sarim Petro, and we end up talking a lot about Kansas. And it's always like, or not always, but like in some seasons we get into these conversations like, what's wrong with the Jayhawks? And it's like, well, they're ranked 13th in the country, so like not too much. Yeah. But they were preseason number 1, and they're so clearly not that. In terms of resume, eye test, even ceiling. I don't see that as a ceiling right now. Like, even if, like,
I agree.
Yeah, I don't even see that as a ceiling. And so two things can be true at the same time. Kansas is 10th at KenPom. That's not bad. Kansas is weird and wildly disappointing. Like, both of those things are kind of true. The game against Baylor was just like, what? First off, did it surprise you that they'd never lost a game when leading by 21 points? That just seemed like you've been playing basketball forever. Sure.
Yeah, only because it didn't surprise me because it's Kansas. Like, Kansas shouldn't lose a game when it's up by 20. So, and I think the previous record, I want to say it was 15. I saw 1,000 stats yesterday, but I think the record was 15 or 16 prior to that the biggest blown lead. So this was comfortably a record for the program.
Yeah, I was just like, they've been playing basketball there forever. I'm sort of surprised this is the first time this has ever happened.
Surprised it wasn't James Naismith, to be honest.
Yes, that mediocre guy. Surprised. I think I could have smacked him around by at least 30.
No doubt.
I know 2-year-old Tony Hinkle would have.
We know that for sure.
I know that for a fact.
No doubt.
I mean, it's just outrageous to say it out loud. Baylor outscored Kansas 64-32 over the final 21 minutes.
Insane.
I mean, what?
Just, and it comes so much compelling drama here. We can stay on Kansas if you want, but this happens, and Iowa State gets smacked at home by K-State. Yeah. These two teams are playing each other Monday night. Like, compelling developments in the Big 12 right now.
Right. Okay. So last thing on Kansas, because you mentioned it with Flory. Bill has often been less willing to rely on freshmen when he has older options, unless the freshmen are like Joel Embiid, Andrew Wiggins, Josh Jackson, something like that. I remember writing a column about Kelly Oubre during his freshman year at Kansas. He was like in single digits in minutes for the much of the first few weeks of the season. It ended up where like that changed, but he still only averaged 21 minutes per game as a freshman, and he was a one and done. Kelly Oubre has averaged more minutes per game in every NBA season in 9 of his 10 than he averaged in his 1 year at Kansas. And so this has been I don't even know if it's a criticism, because the guy's got 2 national championships. Like, perhaps he's the one guy who knows what he's doing as it pertains to relying on freshmen, right? Yeah. But that's been a thing. How about this? I've been going on radio in Kansas City for every week for a while, and I've constantly been asked about, why do you think this freshman isn't playing more? Why do you think this freshman isn't playing more? And that's why in recent weeks when KJ Adams got hurt, I thought this might be a possible turning point for KU, because now you're forced. You just got to play him. But now we're back to where we were, and that was a tough loss. That big picture, I'm never betting against Bill Self in terms of like, I feel like they're going to be in the tournament, they're going to get a good seed, and then we'll see what happens. But this team just doesn't look right relative to what we thought it was going to be. and it really hasn't at any point in this season.
Yeah, that's what and we got to keep it moving, obviously, because there's so much to get to. But I wrote that in the column, GP. Like, we had this discussion a year ago, and it wound up being the worst year ever for Bill Self at Kansas. And now we're getting this again, but the issues are different. Do we have any reason to believe like it won't repeat? Again, it's Self, so I give him a shot, but I understand the high levels of angst with KU fans right now. Like, we hear you loud and clear. Makes for a really compelling team. What the hell happened at Hilton? Like, again, there's one result after another from I love this sport. I love covering it. I love my job, because Saturday was one thing after another. So I had to, at some point I had to leave where I'm here right now to go down, make the 40 or so minute drive to the HQ studios in Stamford, Connecticut. So when I do that, I missed a few things. Like I missed Bobby Hurley pulling his team off the floor, and I knew that Iowa State wasn't looking so good, but I get there and it's, deep into the second half or whatever. And I'm like, what in the damn world is happening? 80-61. It's just like Arkansas with Kansas State. Where you been the past 2.5 months? Your impressions on what either K-State did or what Iowa State didn't do?
Well, I was sitting with Brent Stover, Kansas State grad, all day, and so he was fired up, and so I'm happy for him, and that's a big part of the conversation we're having in the studio. But the story is obvious. Kansas State still got to do this maybe 2 or 3 more times before we can start having a serious conversation about them getting back into bubble talk. So that's a nice win, but unless you can back it up with more nice wins and avoid the bad losses, then it's just going to be a nice moment in a bad season. With Iowa State, this is at least interesting because they went from never losing to anybody to losing to a sub 500 team by 19 at home. And by the way, I bet you're loving this little twist in their season, aren't you?
I'm not. They're going to need like 4 more of these before I can kind of be like, so let's go readdress. I'm not even remotely going near that right now.
Can't get there yet. 2-game losing streak. They've now lost 3 of their past 5, and all 3 of the losses are to teams that are currently unranked in the AP poll. Now, that should change. That should change on Monday, because I think Arizona is going to go into the AP poll on Monday. I've got Arizona into the top 25-1 right now. But what I said is true. As of this moment, Iowa State has lost 3 of its past 5 games, and all 3 of those losses are to teams you will not find in the AP poll right now. It's just sometimes basketball is like this. Like, you've got a game won midweek, and it just gets taken from you. And now and then you don't recover from that, and now here you are. And I don't know that I'm necessarily connecting the dots there, but it went from Iowa State is about to sweep the Arizona schools on the road and come back home for what should be an easy day against Kansas State to, oh no, we went to overtime with Arizona because of a Caleb Love heave. That flipped from a loss to a win, and now we just got smacked around at home, and now we got to go to Allen Fieldhouse on Monday night.
I wonder if the players got caught looking ahead here. Maybe that wasn't the case. And credit to Kansas State, you went in and you just destroyed them. Perfectly executed. And the other backdrop to this is Jerome Tang got booed harder walking into Hilton Coliseum on Saturday than John Calipari did walking into Rupp Arena. The reason for that was Tang a season ago insinuated there was some real nefariousness going on with Iowa State and cheating, and the Iowa State fans did not forget it. So on a day with 1,000 things like that doesn't even register a ton, because Kansas State wound up running him out of the gym. And credit to Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel. Like, McDaniel had 20 points. Hawkins had a really nice game. He had 17 and 7 with 4 steals. He didn't miss a 3. K-State, just like Arkansas, right? They were 50% from the 3-point line. I do wonder if ISU's players on some, like, how can you not? Like, you got Kansas waiting on the road. This game's at home. K-State's been a letdown. Iowa State had 18 turnovers. Yeah. This was it was the first road win of the season for Kansas State. Kansas State had lost 15 road games in a row. Iowa State had won 29 straight home games in a row.
Yeah. Right.
And credit to ESPN Stats and Info. This is a really good nugget. Kansas State is the first sub 500 team to beat a top 5 opponent on the road by at least 15 points ever. And then I did one more. I looked this up once I got to HQ with our research team, because I was curious. I said, I want to know the last time a team that was in the top 5 was at home against an unranked opponent, and lost by at least as much as Iowa State did here today. It's only happened one other time in the past 30 years when Nova got destroyed by Ethan Wragge and crew in Creighton back in 2014 by 30 points. It was the only other time this ever happened. Huge swing. Iowa State was what? Was it like a 15-point favorite in this game or something like that? And then, Kansas State winds up winning by almost, 20 points there. Just an insane and really, really weird result. I do think long-term, I think Iowa State's going to get out of this. Maybe it gets picked off on the road on Monday and takes another loss, but then we get to the beginning of March and it was just yep, that was the midseason lull. They're still good. They're still a 1-2 seed. They're still a Final Four threat. I think that's what's going to be the case, but national title contenders for the most part don't have a game like this for the most part. Like that UConn 2014 team had one like this, but usually you don't have this big of a wart.
I just on that stuff, just Iowa State was a 15.5-point favorite, so big number.
Yeah, okay.
Big number. And I don't know if they were looking ahead, but I do know, or at least I believe, it's really difficult for almost anybody to stay focused all the time.
Yeah.
It's human nature in any competition. And if you are a Big 12 team, one of the places in this season where you are probably most likely to lose focus, it's not going to be a game at Houston or a game with Arizona or a game at Kansas. It might be your home game against Kansas State, against the 2 games under 500 Kansas State team that's been struggling all season. I don't care. I always bring up golf because at my age, that's the only thing I really compete at. And I just don't care who you are. You're going to be a hole where you push a ball out to the right and it's wow, I just wasn't focused, or I didn't do just something's going to slip. I don't know any amateur golfer who's ever played 18 holes without having a moment where they lost focus and lost concentration. And it can happen to basketball players too. And that's why I think it's really hard when we hold these good teams in bad leagues to a standard of you can never lose ever. Because it's just not it. I don't want to say it's unrealistic, because sometimes they really do run through it, but it's hard. It's hard to always win every game you're supposed to win, even if you're supposed to win them. And I don't know where this goes for Iowa State. I'm going to trust them. I think they're still good, but you flipped a loss into a win at Arizona, took a horrific loss at home, and now you got to go to Allen Fieldhouse. It's all good just a week ago. I think somebody said that one time, and you could probably apply that to Iowa State right now. Let's go down to Houston.
Yes.
This was probably the wildest.
Dude, what a day. Continue. The scene was
just great. Final score, Texas Tech 82, Houston 81 in OT. For people who haven't seen it, we were not even 4 minutes into the game, and JT Toppin gets trapped, gets doubled on – let's just say this side of the court, if that makes sense. I know this is a podcast. Sure. I'm sorry.
People listening, it's on this side of the court.
Yes, I'm motioning with my hand, but on the left side of the court. He is trapped in a way. This is the way I described it in the lead of the top 25 and 1, because if you slow it down, this is what you see. He is trapped in a way where he is almost turned to where he needs to throw the ball, cross court, skip pass, like he's a pitcher, a right-handed pitcher in a stretch. Just picture that. That's where he's at with the ball. Now he's left-handed. So to get this ball all the way across the court, he almost has to jump backwards and twist his body. And when he did that, his leg came up, buddy, and it made contact with a man's nuts.
JoJo Tugler's nuts.
At least the area where you can usually find the nuts. And they went and looked at it, and they called flagrant 2, and they ejected him from the game. Meantime, Grant McCaslin's got a monitor. He sees it. He sees what I just described to you, and I think understandably loses his mind.
Yes, but as if his family had just been kidnapped. I mean, it was absolute and completely justified. You know what? I give Grant McCaslin credit. I didn't know he had this in him. I did not realize he had that dog in him. This is a huge. Texas Tech is not over, as you know, by ranking this team top 25 and following GP. Their resume is not yet overloaded with a lot of stuff.
That's right. Yes.
You have this moment. JT Toppin is Texas Tech's best player, and ridiculously gets tossed out of this game. Kirby Hocutt, the AD, afterward puts out a statement. I think this is like the second or third time in men's basketball and football that you've had an AD in that league go after the officiating. It's been a consistent thing. I think that story will find its next phase and advancement on Monday. And good on McCaslin. He obviously lost his mind though, and in that moment, I just wonder if he I was texting him. I was like, I got to know what you're doing back there. He did not get to me during the game. I know he had his phone, and that's fine. He found me afterward, and I was like, I needed you at halftime. Where were you an hour and a half ago? But I wonder if he had some like immediate regrets, like, oh my God. Now, Jeff Linder's a really, really good coach. He was formerly at Wyoming. He's known McCaslin for a long time, and he steps in and he does a wonderful job, and they get Texas Tech gets to win. They win this game, man. It's incredible. Very few people would have thought TTU was going to win in that spot against Houston. Iowa State loses, 29-game home winning streak is done. That was second longest in the country. Houston's 33-gamer was the longest home winning streak going into Saturday. That one expires too. I call Houston the John Wick of college basketball because it's almost impossible to kill. Somehow, some way, Texas Tech gets it done. Best game of the day. It gets to overtime. Houston, which, stole one at Fog Allen a week ago, finds itself in another just completely riveting, captivating game. Credit to TTU, man. Chance McMillan had 23. Elijah Hawkins, the key point guard transfer from Minnesota, he had 17. Darian Williams, not 100%. He plays. He gives him 13. Juwan Roberts, he had just a number of sequences in this game. I thought he was going to carry him. But the most impressive thing about Texas Tech that I can say right now, it is unbeaten on the road in the Big 12 so far. This was a noisy win. It's top 10. Parrish, this is a top 10 team at Ken Palm right now.
Yeah.
5-0 on the road in Big 12 competition away from home. Nasty team. This is the best start for this program and league play since it joined the Big 12 in 96-97. Red Raiders, you are due a lot of love here. Where do you have them in your rankings? And then and maybe this will correspond to where you have them in the rankings, but power rank the Big 12 from the top from me, because you got to put Houston, Arizona, and we'll get to them in a second, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas, Baylor. It's those 6, I guess, in whatever order. How would you power rank them right now, state of the program, how the teams are playing? Who's number 1?
I've got Texas Tech at 15th in the top 25 and 1 right now. Their computer numbers are stronger, but you are right. They don't have much of a resume, and I think that's among the reasons. I should rephrase. Much of a resume relative to Auburn or Tennessee or even Iowa State and some of the other teams that have lived in the top 10 this season. But I'm not ignorant to the computer numbers. I'm probably splitting the difference a little bit between the computer numbers and the actual substance of the resume, while relying mostly on the resume. But they're good. That's undeniable. And if you're Grant McCaslin, that's all you've been hearing is people like me say, hey, yeah, I think they're good. But like, what have they really done? Who have they really beaten? How many big signature wins do they really have? And then you got one. You've been prepping for it all week. It's here in front of you. And you're an underdog, and everybody knows Kelvin's great and Houston's great. They won 33 straight at home. But you think you got a pretty good team. Like, I think we could be the ones that snap this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then not even 4 minutes in, they take your best player away from you for no reason, for no good reason. And that's awful, by the way. Awful.
You have to be better as an official.
I
don't even think it's textbook. I think it's flagrant one at worst. I don't even think that's interpretation of the rule personally. If you actually look at what happened there, and they're lucky quote unquote that this happens like on the first day of February, because if something like that happens in March, like it's the biggest story in the sport. That night, the next morning.
Oh yeah.
But
I mean, if that happens in the NCAA tournament, it's the biggest story.
Yes.
I am not somebody who spends much time complaining about block charge calls and stuff like that. This is hard, man. Yep. You're out there and you got some of the best athletes in the world moving at incredible speeds, and it's quick and it's tough but what they did to reach that conclusion, that shouldn't be tough. You just go look at it and you look at your buddy and you go, we ain't really throwing this dude out of this for that, are we? Yeah. Of course not. And you don't do it. I know where his leg went. That was not intentional. It was so obviously not intentional. You know what it looked like? Because I went and looked at this last night. Oh, buddy, sometimes I get bored. Go to YouTube and just Google best plays by shortstops going into the third base hole. It's the same thing. They're going one direction and having to throw back another direction. And you know what your leg does often? It flies in the air. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like a shortstop going into a hole. And if you're an official, you have got to recognize time and place and context and everything. That was not intentional. And then the other thing you got to do after that is let McCaslin say whatever he wants to say, but unless he puts his hands on you, you let him stay. This happened a few nights earlier at the NBA level. You might have saw a tweet about it. It involved the Grizzlies. The officials, the Grizzlies were out in transition down a point. And final seconds is Jalen Wells, the rookie out of Washington State, who's maybe going to be the rookie of the year. And we didn't even talk about him one time last season.
Holy crap. Is that I don't want to derail, but that's really the thing. Like, he's top 3 for rookie of the year.
Oh yeah. He's starting for the 3rd place team in the West.
That's insane. Love to see it though. Cool.
He might be the rookie of the year. He was playing Division II basketball 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Played at 3rd leading scorer at Washington State last season.
Maybe the Lakers will trade for him in 3 years.
That's maybe. So anyway, he's out in transition. I promise there's a point to this. And the officials blow the whistle because Taylor Jenkins, the Grizzlies coach, on the sideline was going, go, go, go. And they thought he yelled. They thought he asked for a timeout. When he was going like this, go, they thought he and they blew the whistle and and Taylor Jenkins lost his mind. He was cussing and yelling, and they let him say it. Yeah. That's my point. When you screw up like that, you can't compound the problem that you created. And that's what the officials did then. They compounded the problem they created. You just threw a team's best player out for no reason, and now the coach is understandably pissed, and now you're going to throw him out too? So I don't mean this in the way that I don't mean like I'm glad Texas Tech won, because that would imply that I'm glad Houston lost, and I'm not glad about any of it. But that was a neat scene with, I could just sort of picture it. Grant and JT sitting in the locker room watching the game together. And Grant
he posted a photo. I didn't
saw it.
Not on time, but there was a photo that he posted after the fact, and just a huge win.
And Chris Walker made this point on one of our halftimes or post-game show last night. Chris Walker, of course, former interim coach himself. Mm-hmm. He got a special place in his heart for interims. Yep. Like Jeff Linder is a Division I head coach. And so Grant didn't just turn his team over suddenly. Hey, guys, we got 36 more minutes to play against Kelvin Sampson in Houston. I'm handing it over to just somebody who's never been in a situation like this. Like Jeff Linder's coached in meaningful games. And so, I think sometimes it can be beneficial to have somebody like that on your team, on your roster, on your staff. And congrats to Jeff Linder, because that's a good memory for him as well.
Let's go down to Tempe. The game was on CBS. Again, I missed the end of this because I was in transit, but Arizona wins 81-72 over Arizona State. Caleb Love is good again, 27 points. Jaden Bradley also was him and KJ Lewis. I mean, they all had good moments there. I was watching it before I had to dip out there. But Love is really, he's on a little bit of a heater right now. But then Love, I might have been just Love. Hurley said afterward, quote, right near our bench, it was relentless, constant chatter from a couple of Arizona players that wasn't being policed properly. Of course, they're going to be happy with winning, but it was done with no class, in my opinion. So Arizona State's BJ Freeman headbutts Caleb Love. And first Love got ejected, then they went to the monitor, then they ejected Freeman, and then there was, the way the game played out, as I understood it after the fact, they wanted to get him off the floor entirely, and then actually Arizona State technically had to inbound the ball because there was the shot clock expired and all this whatever. And so then Hurley doesn't this was the right move. Oh, by the way, the right move. But he's like, party's over. Let's go. And there's a couple players that are on Arizona's side. And I think Tommy's trying to just get one or two shakes, and he gets one, but Harry's like, no, it's over. We're done. And then Hurley also said afterwards, said, quote, I do get a vote for all conference, and I can tell you who's not getting a vote. End of quote. Bobby, if Caleb Love is one of the 5 to 10 best players in the Big 12, I understand if you've maybe got a grudge. Maybe this dude was riding ASU players and trash talking them for 40 minutes, and it was annoying beyond belief. I get that. You can't not vote for a guy as a means of a personal vendetta. What were your thoughts on the latest chapter of Arizona State, which I want to call it a rivalry, and in some parts it is, but ASU, you got to win some of these games at some point, and they couldn't get it done on Saturday.
I am so tired of being asked what I think about what a Hurley did.
Well, it's time. Let's shift gears here.
I mean, I'm just over it. Every week somebody wants to talk to me about what a Hurley did.
Well, it's on them as much as it's on you. And we got some good stuff on the other Hurley coming very shortly. I'm here to praise Bobby for what he made the right move. Right. I mean, pulling your team. I'm not someone that says you got to get rid of handshakes. I'm not. Frankly, I'm not really on any side of the hill. But in instances like this, when stuff had really boiled over and it reaches a level where we got a headbutt situation in the paint on one side of the floor, just get him out of there.
I guess where I'm at is I think it was probably smart. These players are going back and forth. One dude just headbutt another dude. Let's maybe not try to force them to be cool with each other and just get them away from each other, opposite locker rooms. I think that's probably smart. I thought Bobby was smart to do that. And then we're just arguing about the handshake between he and Tommy. And I know it's tradition for college coaches to do it. Most times NBA coaches do not. The most normal thing in an NBA game at the final buzzer is for one coach to look at the other coach and go,
yeah,
just one of those with the hand. And I know this is not that, because Bobby didn't go shake Tommy's hand simply because we're not just going to shake hands. He was upset with what had happened. My ears weren't on it. I didn't hear what was said. I don't have a strong opinion on it. That's what I'm telling you. I like Bobby Hurley a lot. He was clearly frustrated with how things unfolded. It is what it is. I'll let his president and athletic director worry about it. It's got no concern. I'm genuinely, and I don't mean like be like, I can't believe you asked me about this, Norlander. That's not what I mean at all.
I know.
I just mean like, again, this is what we're doing again. Another Hurley. And what do you think about what he said or did or whatever? It's just like, whatever.
I hear. Hey, listen, on a loaded day, that was early in the day. We didn't even know what was waiting us the rest of Saturday. But let's Zona, by the way, is 11-1 in the past 12 now and just scorching. I asked you the question. I'll answer it real quick, and then we can take the break here. Right now, I think I would power rank the Big 12.
Oh,
I think I would go Arizona 1. I would still go Houston 2, even though Houston lost to Texas Tech. But I'm powering. I'm not trying to just go off one result and have recency bias of 24 hours here. I'd go Arizona 1, Houston 2, Iowa State 3, Texas Tech 4, Baylor 5, Kansas 6 right now. I think that's what I would go 1 through 6. I think that's my order. And Baylor, Kansas is but after the way that Kansas lost, that's why I'd have them 6 right now.
Yeah, in terms of like where I have them in the top 25-1, Iowa State's my highest ranked Big 12 team at 6. After that, it's Houston at 10, then Texas Tech at 15, Kansas at 16, Arizona at 25, and then that's it. But that really is not a good reflection of who's playing well right now. That's more of a body of work stuff. But Arizona's obviously playing really well right now, but they also started 4-5, and those first 9 games matter. So fun league, as always. Maybe hasn't been at the tip top of the sport or the front of the conversation the way it has in years past because of the strength of the SEC, but still a fun league. And I think you would agree, very much up for grabs. Let's move on. Elsewhere around the country, other neat stuff happening. We'll do the weekend rip around next. First, let's get another word from our partners. Oh, it'll be here before you know it.
That's
right. You know what the best thing is about Masters weekend?
The college hoop season is over.
That's right, baby.
I know that's where you're going.
Woo, woo. It's time for the weekend whip around. Norlander, let's start right at the top of the national rankings. Not sure what else there is to say about Auburn, but we both picked them. We both picked them to lose at Ole Miss. I don't know why we did that.
We also picked against Arizona. Not a good, as expected. Just a terrible weekend for the Final Four and 1.
I mean, I did better than you.
Okay, maybe you did. We picked Auburn to lose outright, by the way. It wasn't that we didn't pick them to cover the 8 or whatever. We picked them to lose. How'd that go for us?
Not same way most stuff goes for us, if I'm being honest. Auburn 92, Ole Miss 82. Bruce Pearl's Tigers now have 12 quadrant 1 wins. And I know what you're thinking, but GP, you told me on Friday they had 12 quadrant 1 wins. They lost one. Over the weekend. They gained 1 at Ole Miss, but then their home win over Mississippi State flipped to quadrant 2 because Mississippi State got its brains beat in by Missouri, 27 points in Starkville. So, and that took Mississippi State outside of the top 30 of the net. So that quad 1 win flipped to quad 2. So Auburn still on 12 quadrant 1 wins, but 20-1 overall, 8-0 in the SEC, 12 quadrant 1 wins. Nobody else in the country has more than 8. I keep thinking they're going to lose at some point, but I guess I should probably
I'm not picking it again. I'm just about at the UConn principle here. Like until I see it happen, I'm not going to pick against Auburn again, man. And by the way, this whole it's not a great endorsement of the quadrant system when you can lose and gain them like you've got a lost dog out there. Like, oh, I lost it overnight. Don't know where it is. Hopefully someone will find him. We'll get it back. Yeah. That's the problem. You
have to put a chip in your quadrant 1 wins so that if you lose them, you can just you can find them with an app on your phone.
We'll get to Duke UNC in a little bit here, but Broome had 20. The reason why I say that is Broome had 20 points, 12 boards, 4 assists, 2 blocks. Remains an awesome race there. Ole Miss has never beaten a number 1 team. Had another opportunity. It's 0-16 all time. It has lost 9 straight home games to AP ranked teams. 9 in a row. They've had opportunities against the team with the number next to the name. Haven't gotten it done. And Auburn beat Ole Miss for the 4th consecutive time. It's the first time ever the Tigers have won 4 in a row over the Rebs. Can we cruise? Can we actually just
let me ask you one more question and I
want to get to Mizzou.
Because it'd be wild if both these sentences are true at the end of this. If the SEC goes down as the league that put more teams in the NCAA tournament than any league in the history of the sport, which is not only possible, I think most people think it's probable at this point. What if that's true and Auburn goes undefeated in that same league? Isn't that crazy? What if they ran through the toughest league in the history of the sport with 0 losses?
That would put them, depending on what they do in the March, if they don't win a title, that's going to be like 99 Duke level kind of team, like one of the best ever to not win a national championship, that kind of stuff. The Houston teams from the 80s, that kind of group there. But they got to get there, although they probably will at this point. Can we talk Mizzou? And we'll get to Tennessee as well. Let's talk SEC.
Yeah, let's stay on this. It's fine.
Missouri. We got a poll up right now. Who had the best win of the weekend? We'll get to those results in a few. Hadn't won at the hump in 12 years. Snapped an 8-game losing streak. Missouri has won consecutive road games against ranked opponents for the first time in 26 years, since 1999. It got its largest win on the road over a ranked team ever by winning by 27 points, 88-61. Mississippi State's really spiraling at the moment, dropped 5 of 7, but Dennis Gates, congratulations, man. You are, I know we're saying this almost every other show, but we're giving love to the coaches that deserve it. Like Dennis Gates right now, literally as a result of getting this win, like I think I would have him top 5 for coach of the year. His team did not beat an SEC opponent last season. The portal group that he brought in, when you brought in Mark Mitchell, okay, you brought in who else? They got Tony Perkins, Caleb Grill. Like it wasn't inspiring a ton of folks, and yet they're 6-2 in a really, really good league, and all of the losses are entirely reasonable. At Memphis, the first night of the season, by 3 to Illinois in bragging rights. They got destroyed at Auburn. Whatever. Yeah, join the club.
Yeah,
and then they lost recently against Texas. Credit to the Tigers. Tell me you got this team in your top 20. I'm going to say this. Tell me this team is in your top 20. It better not even be in your top 25-1. That's a top 20 team right now.
They have them 14th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have them 14th right behind Memphis at 13. And I know we probably put 15 different coaches in the coach of the year conversation over the past couple of months, but these lists do change week to week. And if you were putting one out tomorrow, how about this? We actually did the dribble handoff. I think it was last week about who would we vote for coach of the year, and nobody put Dennis Gates. But if we did that exact same thing this week, somebody might. Yeah. And I wouldn't call them dumb. It's been incredible. It's not just the transfer portal. Some of this is internal development. Tamar Bates was on Missouri's team last season that didn't win a game in the SEC. Anthony Robinson was on Missouri's team last season that didn't win a game in the SEC. So it's a variety of things that he brought together and has taken a program that went winless in an inferior SEC last season and is now 17-4 overall and 6-2 in the league. Put him on a coach of the year list. I won't object. He deserves it. He's been awesome. And this is among the reasons why it looks like Missouri was smart to not get reactionary and be like, well, we must fire a coach if he can't win a league game. Some schools, some athletic directors would subscribe to that. They just say, man, if you go 0 and whatever in your league, we gotta move on. Vanderbilt did it a few years ago. But Missouri was like, no, we think we've got a good coach who just had a bad year. We think we've got a good coach who had a bad year. And that's what it looks like he is. It looks like he's a good coach who had a bad season, but he's bounced back tremendously.
Awesome turnaround. Tennessee beat Florida in the first big game of the day, 64-44. That is obviously a script flip from the 30-point beat. So these two teams have met twice, and the combined margin of victory/defeat is 50 points. Can we please get them in the SEC tournament? Tennessee does this without Zakai Ziegler, who's got the knee, and then Igor Milic just didn't play because he was battling an illness. So they do it without two of their starters. And Chaz Lanier had 19. Florida was just terrible, like historically bad. 4 of 27 from 3-point range. From the field, Florida shot 24.5%. Shouts to Kyle Boone because he dug up this stat. It's the worst field goal percentage by the Florida Gators men's basketball program in recorded history, dating back to at least 1938-39. Florida had never had a game that bad from the field until Saturday. Also, it's 44 points, the lowest it's had in a game in 35 years, dating back to 1990. Tennessee has won 8 straight home games against the Gators. Rick Barnes is 6-0 at home against top 5 opponents while at Tennessee. And this is a stunner. Until Tennessee did this to Florida, beating the ranked Gators, Tennessee has now won 6 straight home games against top 5 opponents. It's the first team ever to string together 6 consecutive home wins over top 5 teams in the history of the Southeastern Conference. Meantime, Florida has still never won a top 10 matchup when faced in a road environment. Takeaways on what the Gators and Vols did early on Saturday.
I'm not surprised Tennessee won. I'm obviously surprised it was like that, particularly when they were down 2 starters, but the why and the how is in the numbers. You shot 24.5% from the field and 14.8% from 3. I mean, and like everybody in that range, I wish I had yesterday's top 25 and 1 pulled up, but I have a file that I look at, and it's got like a capital W and a dash and a 1 in Auburn and W-2 in Duke. And the W represents win, and just so I can keep track of it visually. I just remember looking at it last night. And it was like L, like in a row.
11 of them. Yeah, 11 ranked teams lost on Saturday.
It was just, but in that range where Florida is, just about everybody in that range lost. And so I didn't adjust too much for the result in terms of dinging the Gators. I think I moved them down a spot. I think I moved Tennessee up to 4. Now Florida is at number 5 in the top 25 and 1. It's just a result. Like, this is what coaches tell you about stuff like that all the time. Flush it, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to shoot 24.5% from the field again, probably. Not going to shoot 14.8% from 3 again, probably. Just a bad night against a good team in a crazy environment, and put it behind you and move on. They're still fine, I think.
Vandy's going to drop out of the poll. We can move on, but just a quick note, 97-67, Oklahoma, credit to you. I mean, outscored Vanderbilt 56-27 in the final 19 minutes of the game, and that 30-point win matched the most ever for Oklahoma against a ranked opponent. So good on Porter Moser's guys. Can we go to man, we're an hour. This just speaks to Saturday. We're an hour into the show. We got to talk about the most important result that we haven't gotten to yet, and that is UConn, which did not have Liam McNeely, going up to Milwaukee, beating number 9 Marquette, and doing it despite having 25 turnovers. Again, you know, if I had a button that could pull back every single data point or question that comes into my mind and I could have it ready for you, I would. But I want to know how many teams have ever had 25 turnovers on the road against a top 10 opponent and won a game. How long is that list? I'm sure it's happened before. You almost never see that, in particular because Marquette only had 8 turnovers, man. Only had 8. UConn has 9 straight wins against top 10 teams. awesome on the glass in this game. Solo ball. He's in our thumb for today's episode on YouTube. He was awesome. 25 and 11, career high 7 3-pointers. I'm at the point where I think Solomon Ball is a top 3 big shot taker, big shot maker in college basketball. I've seen it consistently in games where UConn's won, where UConn has not even gone on to win. He has a confidence. They know how to get him open. The stroke is smooth, and way more often than not, when he's letting it go from beyond that arc, GP, it's going in. I thought it was so critical for not just UConn to win. Like, that was a very big, noisy win and sets up a super compelling week in the Big East. Because you had St. John's barely beat Providence at the Garden. Awesome game. CBS Sports Network. Kaderi Richmond has his best game in a St. John's uniform. Now Marquette and St. John's are going to meet on Tuesday. Then St. John's is going to go to UConn on Friday. Then Marquette's got to go play on the road at Creighton on Saturday. Awesome week for the Big East coming up. This game, this result here, really set up and enhance the stakes of it. And they're going to have McNeely back when they play against St. John's on Friday. So to have the win, to have Ball play as good as he did, to not have McNeely available, really good gains and adds to the intrigue of the Big East. What were your thoughts on Huskies beating the Golden Eagles?
Well, if you try to figure out how you win on the road against a quality team, turning the ball over, it's Solo Ball goes 7 of 9 from 3 for 25 points, 11 rebounds. He was awesome. He's been awesome. He's now UConn's leading scorer and is shooting like 45% from 3 on nearly 7 attempts per game. So he's terrific and has been for much of the season. UConn full strength, I think, is going to be a factor in the NCAA tournament. Like, regardless of where they're seated, I'm at least going to be open to the possibility they could run it back to another Final Four. And they should be getting Liam McNeely back soon. But the resume is still not one that I was willing to put into the top 25 and 1 on Sunday morning. They're 16-6 overall, 8-3 in the Big East, 4-3 in their past 7 games, 4-3 in quadrant 1, 4-2 in quadrant 2, 3-1 in quadrant 3. So 8-5 in the first 2 quadrants with 2 quadrant 2 losses and a Q3 loss to a sub 100 Colorado team. Based on how I do things, that's not top 26 body of work. If you care about computer numbers, right now, UConn is, even after the big win at Fiserv Forum, UConn is 30th in the net, 30th at KenPom, 32nd at Torvik. You can find them in the top 25 of other computers, but in those 3 outside of it. So ceiling still high with McNeely in that lineup and Solo Ball playing at this level. But right now, I would leave UConn unranked. I did leave UConn unranked right now.
Resume-wise, 34 strength of record. Torvik wins above bubble. How they've done against their entire resume versus an average bubble team. They're 37th right now in wins above bubble. So to GP's point, beyond even just the quadrant results, that's what we have there. Really, I mean, impressive stuff from Dan Hurley's program there on the road. Also, by the way, Creighton, thanks to I missed this in transit as well, but Stephen Ashworth hit like a corner 3 that banked in near the end. They were able to escape a loss against Villanova. We have got, you know what? We've got more than an hour in. Let's talk Duke, North Carolina. It was a laugher. North Carolina went on an 18-2 run in the second half to cut the lead all the way down to 16. It winds up being a 17-point margin in the end. Duke wins 87-70. It was the largest loss for Carolina against Duke in 15 years. Duke is now 11-0 in the ACC for the first time since J.J. Redick was a senior. In the context of this season, Duke has now won 13 games by at least 15 points this season. They are rolling teams. Cooper Flagg was responsible through making the basket or having an assist for the first 19 points of this game. He now, let me just bring up real quick here, GP. He now is averaging 20.0 points flat, 8.0 rebounds flat, 4.2 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.2 blocks. Yet again, just another really well-balanced effort. Con Knippel wound up actually leading the team in scoring. I think he had 22 in this one. And one thing that kind of sprung to my mind as we were talking about this on HQ, I didn't mention it though, was Hubert Davis had a clip that was shared on social just a little bit from his Thursday media availability, I think it was, where he kind of got asked about Carolina and its issues down the stretch and all that kind of stuff, because it's had a lot of issues and it's had some slow starts. Yet again, Carolina can't get out to a good start. And he kind of was quiet, introspective, about 5 seconds of silence, and then he goes, "We'll be ready." And if you could smash cut the "we'll be ready" to the, 40-13 advantage in the first half. Obviously, if you're a Carolina fan, it's infuriating. I thought Duke would win and Duke would win with ease, but I did think we would get a North Carolina team that would offer some resistance. Didn't have that. The RJ Davis stuff gets more vexing by the game. This is a dude that I had championed and loved through the first 4 years of his college career. Something's changed. There's a lot that's changed. Disappointing not to see Carolina, even though they're way overmatched. Duke is just it's 2 tiers above everyone else in the ACC minimally. You thought you might get something competitive. Wasn't even close. This was, the 14th most interesting or compelling result on a loaded Saturday. But nonetheless, it's Duke, Carolina, and Duke reasserts itself in its quest to compete with Auburn for best team in the country.
We've reached the point where it's now a real topic of conversation. Like Dan Wolken, a national columnist for USA Today, wrote about North Carolina's Hubert Davis issue. And we talked about it last week, and Dan actually made more or less the same point I made, which is I don't care about tournaments in X amount of years or 1 seeds or 3 seeds or if you're North Carolina, you are one of the biggest brands in the sport. Maybe the best job in the sport. Maybe not. We could debate it another time, but it's certainly on the list. Do you have one of the best coaches in the sport? That's what you should be asking yourself. You've spent 4 years and he's been on campus longer than that. So you know this guy. Like, that's the thing they got to decide. Do we have the right coach? We are one of the best basketball programs of all time. Do we have one of the best basketball coaches working today? And if you don't think you do, what do you do about it?
Yeah. And if you don't think you do, who's available? Who can you go get? I still believe this is like, we're deep into it, so we don't need to go. This is a conversation for many more podcasts. I believe Carolina is still that school. Like, I still think it's going to be in a spot where it should be able to attract a really damn impressive name, but I'm still not there that they're going to make that move this season. Now, if it continues to fall, if they lose at home to Duke and they get run out and they got big games upcoming here to even try and halfway salvage their resume, like, I'm open to the idea that this conversation could change with quickness because it is North Carolina. But as we sit here today, you asked me to predict, will he be there for year 5 or not? I would actually still today, if I had to predict, I would say that that Hubert Davis will still be coaching there in year 5.
You just asked. Yeah. I guess if I had to lean one way or the other, I'd lean he probably gets year 5 and is the face of the hot seat conversation heading into year 5. Maybe that's where we end up. But just to double down on my point, like, when you've worked with somebody or been around somebody for 4 years, you should know. Like, I tell you, anybody I've ever worked with hand in hand, like closely with for 4 years, I can tell you whether they're good or not. I mean, I'll have to privately tell you, but I can tell you, and that's what they gotta ask themselves that question. And if they reach the answer of yes, we think we got the right guy, then absolutely keep him and set him up to win. But you should be able at North Carolina to answer that question positively. We are North Carolina. Do we have one of the best coaches in the country? If you ever say no to that, it is time for you to do something different.
Let's stick with this in preseason top 10 teams that are underperforming. St. Mary's won 62-58 over Gonzaga. St. Mary's has a 3-game lead on the Bulldogs, and we are on February 2, GP. Gonzaga is 7-3 in the conference. It's still just like Kansas. I mean, it's number 11 at KenPom right now. Zags went 3 of 13 from the field in the final 10 minutes. Mikey Lewis, who's that? Well, he's a new stud for St. Mary's. He had 16 in this game. Shouts to Harry Wessels as well. The big man from down under. He was able to stymie Graham Ike late in the game. And then Ike, I want to say he had the 3 from the wing there that didn't fall as well. He had 24 points and 8 rebounds. Did Ike. Ryan Nemhard, he had a 3 that I actually thought might give Gonzaga an escape shoot in this one, but it did not wind up happening there. Nemhard had 12 assists, 11 points in this game. St. Mary's, really strong resume, should be ranked, in my opinion, on Monday with what they've been able to do. Only 3 losses overall. With Gonzaga, we are now at the point where, and again, Saturday was insane. There were so many big results, but I'm telling you, like, we have now entered the point where Gonzaga is 1 loss away from, going to be in the tournament. That's where it is right now, compiling a lot of losses and is giving itself less and less wiggle room. I still think Gonzaga is going to make the tournament, but a year ago it was in this spot, had the game against Kentucky in the non-con, won that, and then found an on-ramp to a cruise to a Sweet 16. That non-con game doesn't exist on the schedule this season, and it's going to have to get hot and atone for this loss before it gets to postseason play.
Yeah, they've got. I guess a few weeks ago we were talking like they'll be fine. They're going to get in the NCAA tournament, but they're not going to have the seed that's going to correlate with their computer numbers because they're not going to have any substance to the resume. And wherever we were in that conversation then, it's become a worse conversation for them now. And, you know, when you play in the WCC, it's a little bit like playing in the AC or the Mountain West. If you take a bad loss here, bad loss there, and miss out on your opportunities, your very few opportunities of good wins, well, then you've messed up. You've messed up. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about losing to St. Mary's at St. Mary's. I think the Zags were actually underdogs in the game. But for the second straight year, we've gotten pretty deep into the calendar, and they don't have the resume, a brand of their size with a quality team and strong computer numbers should have.
I completely agree. I thought you had a second half thought. I completely agree. I thought you were going somewhere else with that. Sorry, GP. I agree, and it's time to sound some alarms there with Gonzaga. If I tell you right now, just which team is more likely to get right, Kansas, Gonzaga? Which one would you pick?
Well, it's just so much easier to get right in the WCC. Like, you don't even have to get good. You just win all the games.
Yeah.
You know,
it's back to their. How about this? Which team gets back to their standard? Do you think it's still Gonzaga between those two?
You probably right, because Kansas's standard is like number one in the country.
Yeah, okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Before we look ahead, I'm going to run down a few results here. Which one you think is the most meaningful? Here we go. Michigan State lost for the first time since Maui. Lost 70-64 in LA against USC. Must win after the computers after, and we don't have time for that, but it was an interesting quote. Go find it. Maybe it'll be relevant down the road here. Trojans are 13-8, still have a lot of work to do. Louisville, classic Norlander jinx. I feature Pat Kelsey in the court report. They promptly go on the road and they get beat by 7 against Georgia Tech. Louisville's 10-game winning streak is over. They allowed Georgia Tech to get 50 in the second half of that game. New Mexico wins on the road, 82-63 at Utah State. That is a big time win. Mountain West, UNM, now in first place. Utah State was a really good story up to this point. May still be a good story down the stretch, but Richard Pitino, had a great tweet earlier in the day where he was like, I'm at a Starbucks here in Utah waiting for my father to put out a video asking for the Utah State fans to please give me a standing ovation, which was hilarious. Nevertheless, his team goes on to win. No standing ovation. Wisconsin beat Northwestern. There is news from that. Brooks Barnheiser's career is over. Northwestern not heading to the tournament, and Chris Collins, through tears, announced that due to a foot injury, Barnheiser, he was being shut down. And that's a big loss there. Just a couple more GP. Wake beat Pitt in a bubble game, or a would-be bubble game, 76-74. Steve Forbes texted me asking me why Pitt's net ranking was still so much higher than That's a fact that he did do that. I haven't done the digging just yet, but I think they have a couple of like 4-point wins against teams that rank in the 340s. Forbes, that is your answer. Miami ended its 23-game losing streak against power conference opponents. It beat Notre Dame on Saturday. Doesn't mean a lot, but you know what? When you're a team like that going through hell, take anyone you can get. Congrats to Bill Courtney and that team for finally getting a win. And apparently, credit to Rocco Miller who had the tweet. The Grand Canyon Utah Valley game had to be halted on Saturday. Are you aware of why it had to be halted, GP? This tweet got sent around a couple times. Did you see what happened?
I did not.
Quote, vegetables were thrown onto the court. The PA announcer delivers a stern warning to the Lope faithful as one of the vegetables splattered near midcourt. Gotta assume that's a tomato. Tweet continues. A technical will be issued for the next veggie tossed. GCU leads 33-18. Is this the Muppets? Vegetables? What's going on? They're playing Utah Valley. I think that's the Wildcats. What the hell is going on where people are stuffing produce into their pants going in to watch a college basketball game? Can we not live in a society, people? It's a wild Saturday, Parrish.
I must have missed the vegetable throwing, but I'm disappointed I did.
Utah Valley is the Wolverines, by the way. My mistake. I pride myself on knowing all the mascots, but I missed on that one.
Well, if I ever find myself face to face with a Wolverine, I might resort to throwing vegetables as well.
That might well work. There was plenty more, but we gotta keep it moving. Let's look ahead here. Monday, Tuesday. What do we got?
On Monday, not much. Iowa State at Kansas. We've discussed it. Big game for both teams. Both of them need a win. Virginia at Pitt. The only other kind of interesting thing. Pitt very bubbly. Just 2-5 in its last 7 after Saturday's loss at Wake Forest. This would be a quadrant 3 loss at home if they took it. I would advise them not to do that. On CBS Sports Network on Monday, it's Colgate at Lehigh, Charleston at William and Mary. On Tuesday, be back on CBS Sports Network, the Allen College Basketball Podcast, 1 o'clock Eastern. So set your DVRs for that. Then later on at night, busy schedule. I'll be in studio all night with Brent Stover, Roy Hibbert, John Rothstein. We'll have LaSalle at VCU, St. Bonaventure at Loyola Chicago, Boise State at UNLV. Elsewhere, Marquette at St. John's, Vandy at Florida, Kentucky at Ole Miss, Indiana at Wisconsin, Michigan State at UCLA. You care about any of that stuff?
That's all good. You also have Arizona at BYU. That's a sneaky one. Tuesday is loaded. We'll obviously preview that a little bit with some thoughts on the Tuesday edition of Eye on College Basketball. We also have, Indiana, Wisconsin, I think you said. That's a 9 Eastern tip. We don't have time for it now. Maybe we save it for Wednesday. The AI-produced Bob Knight pop song, which took over my life for about 24 hours. If you haven't found it, please go find it. It is profanity laden. I can't not play this at the end of the show at some point here. Did you listen to the song?
Of course, it was good.
Unbelievable. So I'll try and get that on Wednesday's show. It had been a while since something had so unexpectedly brought me so much joy. I was almost in tears laughing at this thing. So go hunt that out if you haven't yet. If not, we'll try and get it on the Wednesday show. Definitely not the Tuesday show. Tuesday is loaded. I would say the game that I'm most looking forward to Tuesday, looking at this, I honestly think it's Kentucky at Ole Miss. I want to see how the Wildcats respond to that. But a close number 2 is Michigan State. After the loss at USC, that's a really good game. It's a late tip. Tuesday night, 10 Eastern on Peacock. Spartans at Bruins there. But it's good stuff up and down. Marquette at St. John's is awesome as well. And as I said before, that's a big week for the Big East. And hell, maybe we even get into the Big East stuff on the Tuesday show. But yeah, man, GP Saturday was just wild. And just real quick, and we can wrap up. I follow the NBA like in a fleeting manner until the college basketball season ends. And when we were about 85% of the way done with doing our HQ stuff, and then Cobb actually had the tweet up, my reaction was like everyone else, where he's like, I thought he was like, I didn't know if you know what he was saying to me, because we were getting ready to do the next segment. It was like, Anthony Davis just got traded for Luka Doncic. And I was like, I didn't even know how to respond in the moment. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, Shams is tweeting that they did the trade. I was like, now, tonight, Luka Doncic, one of the 3 best players in the NBA, is going to the Lakers, or giving up Anthony Davis. And then you find out like how much is not attached to this deal. I do think February 1 will be one of the the bigger days on the sports calendar. It doesn't have the Super Bowl. It doesn't have the Final Four. It doesn't have the World Series. But for any day that doesn't have a major championship event attached to it, I won't forget it, man. College hoops was all over the map in the best ways, in the most insane ways. And then to have that topped off, like I got home and I wanted to check a little bit more. I got home late. I got home at like 1:30 in the morning, and I saw a couple of tweets from you about it. It just seems fake. And it does feel like this really has the potential to go down as one of the worst trades of all time. Now, maybe for whatever reason, Luka's career goes in an entirely different direction, and we're all like, remember that time when we thought this was the dumbest thing ever, and look how it turned out? Maybe, but to me, it's the most shocking trade in NBA history. So you talk about the NBA plenty, but as we wrap up, I know this has taken even the casual sports fan can't help but be fascinated by this, because you never see 2 of the 15 best players in a given sport ever traded for each other. Like the last time this happened, I couldn't even tell you, and it winds up dominating the weekend. This is the story of the day. It'll be the story of the week, basically until Super Bowl ramp up takes over.
It is the first time in history 2 All-NBA players have been traded for each other. Like they were All-NBA last season and got traded for each other the next season. That's never happened. It is probably the biggest trade in NBA history, and I would argue the dumbest. Like it makes no sense. Like the Mavericks have to know something about Luka, right? This is so bizarre, Parrish. I mean, he better be an alcoholic for you to justify this. And even then, I would say, let's try to get him some help. I mean, I'm not joking. You're worried about his conditioning? All right. He's been first team All-NBA 5 straight years while fat. What? He had you in the finals less than a year ago. We're worried about his conditioning. So you're going to go trade him for Anthony Davis? Like what? An older, often injured big who is awesome when he's available, but ain't the most reliable dude in the world? I mean, do you know what you do when you have a 25-year-old generational talent who you think has conditioning issues? You fire all the people who can't convince him to get in better shape and hire new people who might be able to, but you do not give up on that talent. Like the reporting is that they were hesitant to commit a supermax to 25-year-old Luka Doncic. Do you realize 29 other franchises would do it in a second? In a second. It is crazy.
Dude, it's so I'm fascinated by it. It makes no sense. The fact that there weren't like 97 draft picks attached to the trade makes it even wilder, and they didn't shop them.
I mean, there's all these graphics. The Celtics got more for Marcus Smart than the Mavericks got for Luka Doncic. And like so Nico Harrison holds a press conference this afternoon. Everything he says just makes it sound dumber. Well, did Luka ask for a trade? No. Yeah. Were you worried he wasn't going to sign the extension? No. So who else did you talk to besides the Lakers? Nobody. I mean,
man. It's been a while. We needed this as a society. Okay. Just to jolt us out of our everyday existence, like that something this unthinkable actually materialized. I'm riveted by it.
Did you see the video of there's like a party, like a house party last night in Dallas?
No.
Oh, it's like a bunch of young kids in there. It looks like a college house party. And everybody's just looking at their phone and going, what the fuck? What? They traded Luka. It's like, just shut the party down. Everybody's crazy. Yeah. Here's how I found out. We're on set, earpiece in just like this. Seth Edelstein is our producer last night. It's like we're about 60 seconds from being live on TV. And Seth gets into my ear. GP, you see this trade? NBA, you see this trade? Do you know Seth?
Yeah, a little bit.
He's energetic, buddy. So so he's in your ear. He's like, GP, you see this trade? I'm like, what trade? I haven't seen anything. Seth, what's up? He's like, well, it might be fake. I think it's fake. It might be fake. I'm like, what is it? Just tell me. He's like, it's from Shams, but it might be fake. I said, what is it? He said, the Mavericks have traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers for Anthony. I said, no, Seth, that's fake. Okay. I said, no, Seth, that's not real. He's like, okay, I didn't think it was real. This is how all you need to know this is ridiculous. For the first 15 minutes that this trade was out there, coming from the most legitimate NBA reporter working today, in terms of if he tweets it, it's probably right.
No one believed it.
Nobody believed it.
Everyone thought it was fake.
All the players.
Yeah.
Did you see the Devin Booker interview?
I didn't, but I saw Kevin Durant responding in real time. By the way, where are these NBA players getting the phones on the benches? I don't know that situation. But they're looking at the phone, and Durant's face was incredible. That's what sold it for me.
Devin Booker said they were on the bench, and somebody said Luka got traded, and he said Luka Garza, because he couldn't believe it would be Luka Doncic. The only context where you would hear Luka and think of Luka Garza instead of Luka Doncic is if it's connected to a trade, because it makes no sense that an NBA franchise would trade Luka Doncic. I mean,
I know. What a day. What a weekend, man. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's completely riveting. So anyway, I didn't want to get out of here without at least acknowledging, I thought college hoops was coming out of this weekend as the story, and and rightfully so. The Luka AD thing just obliterates everything else that happened, because we never see something like this. Anyway, that's a show.
That's the show. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend. Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching and listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So please do that. We'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.